The sky above Seoul was painted with the soft glow of sunset, brushing the tops of the high-rise buildings in warm amber light. From the window of her modest studio apartment in Mapo District, Hannah stared out, her thoughts wandering. The city buzzed with life below, but inside, her world felt unusually quiet. She had always been the quiet type, observant, calm, and seemingly ordinary. But under that composed surface lived a mind constantly replaying memories, weighing decisions, and searching for meaning in the chaos of human behavior. The message had arrived just an hour ago. A voice memo from someone she hadn't heard from in years. "Hey, Hannah. It's me. I'm coming back to Seoul. Let's meet. Just once. Please." The voice was unmistakable. Jehun. A name she hadn't allowed herself to say aloud in years. A name soaked in echoes of laughter, promises, and betrayal. Her fingers trembled slightly as she replayed the message. There was no anger in his tone. No explanation. Just a request. A plea. As if time had dissolved everything but longing. She turned away from the window, sat at her small dining table, and let her eyes rest on the photo tucked into the corner of the mirror. Two people, carefree, arms around each other, the Han River behind them. A younger Hannah and Jehun. Before everything changed. The last time they spoke, it hadn't been with words. It was in the silence that followed the truth. The moment when she had seen something she couldn't unsee. The way his eyes had dropped, the guilt too heavy for even a lie. She had built her life, since then, piece by piece. New job, new friends, new routines. And yet, that one piece of the past never quite fit anywhere. It hovered. Was this message his way of removing it? Or planting it deeper? Hannah stood slowly and walked to her wardrobe. She pulled out the long coat she hadn't worn in ages, the one she used to wear when they would meet on chilly evenings. The scent of old perfume still clung faintly to it. She hesitated, then slipped it on. Seoul, at night, was brisk and bustling. As she made her way to the cafe in Itaewon he had mentioned, her heart pounded like a drum in a distant parade. People laughed around her. Music echoed from alleyways, but Hannah only heard the rhythm of her own thoughts. When she entered the cafe, the warmth of the room wrapped around her like a memory. She scanned the space. And there he was. Jehun. Sitting at the corner table, hands wrapped around a mug, staring at the door as if he'd been doing that for hours. Their eyes met. In that split second, Hannah felt time fold. Not backward. Not forward. But inward. Like a quiet collapse. And without a word, she walked toward the man she once loved. Or maybe still did. Or maybe never truly had. The first thing Hannah noticed was his smile. It was small, hesitant but familiar. A smile she had once trusted with her whole heart. Now it sat on his face like an ill-fitting mask, and she could almost see the strain beneath it. "Hi, Hannah." His voice cracked slightly. It wasn't weakness, it was memory. She pulled out the chair across from him without a word, lowered herself down, and placed her gloves beside her cup. The cafe's soft jazz music filled the silence between them, but nothing could drown the sudden storm in her chest. "You look well," Jehun offered, sipping his drink, though he barely touched it. "You too," she replied quietly. It wasn't entirely true. He looked older, a little more worn, like someone who had run from something only to realize it still followed him. There was a long pause before he leaned forward. "I didn't know how else to reach you." "You could have stayed gone," Hannah said, the words sharper than she intended. His smile faltered. "I deserved that," he admitted, lowering his gaze. They sat there in silence again, both knowing that politeness was useless. Small talk would not save them. "I'm not here to justify anything," Jehun said. I wanted to see you, and tell you the truth. The whole truth." Hannah's eyes narrowed. She wanted to laugh. Or scream. The truth? Now? After everything? "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jehun sighed, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Worn edges, crumpled corners. He slid it across the table toward her. "I wrote this the night you left," he said. "I never sent it. I didn't think I had the right." She stared at the envelope. Her name was scrawled in his handwriting, still the same as the notes he used to leave on her desk in university. "I didn't cheat on you with her," he said suddenly. "I know that's what it looked like. But it wasn't that." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. That night. The phone call. The voice in the background. The woman's laugh. The way he had looked at her when she confronted him. Guilt-ridden, cold, silent. "Then what was it, Jehun?" she asked, her fingers tightening around the envelope but not opening it. He hesitated. "I was hiding something, yes. But it wasn't an affair. It was worse." Hannah blinked. "Worse?" "There's something you never knew about me," he continued. "Something I never told anyone back then. I thought I was protecting you. But really, I was protecting myself." Her mind swirled with 1,000 possibilities. What could be worse than betrayal? Jehun stood up suddenly, pushing his chair back. "I can't tell you here."
"Not now."
"But if you're willing, meet me tomorrow. Same time. Same place." And before she could answer, he walked out of the cafe, leaving the envelope and 1,000 unanswered questions on the table between them. Hannah stared at the envelope for a long time. The smile he gave her had lied, but the pain in his eyes hadn't. Hannah sat in her apartment, the envelope untouched on her desk. The city outside glowed under a dull gray sky, and distant sounds of soul traffic filled the air like a low hum. Her fingers hovered above the flap, uncertain, as if opening it would also reopen the wounds she had worked so hard to bury. She had almost thrown it away twice. Once in the cafe, her hand halfway to the bin before she pulled back. And once more that morning, as she stood beside her window, watching the world move on as if nothing had happened. But now it was time. With slow, careful hands, she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Jehun's handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, slightly rushed, but always legible. She read, "Hannah, I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did, what I hid, was selfish. But I never stopped loving you. I know you won't believe me. Not after that night. You saw something you were never meant to see. But not because it was about another woman. It was about me. And my family. What you heard on the phone, it wasn't a lover. It was someone from my past. Someone who reminded me of who I used to be before you. And what I was running from. My father. He was involved in something illegal. Dangerous. And I was caught in it for years. When I met you, I thought I could leave it all behind. But I couldn't. They pulled me back in. I lied to you because I was afraid. Not of losing you, but of dragging you into the mess I couldn't escape. I thought I could handle it quietly. That I could protect you by staying silent. But the more I lied, the more I hurt you. That night, the phone call, it was a warning. A reminder that I could never be free. I pushed you away because I believed it was the only way to keep you safe. I never expected you to forgive me. I just needed you to know the truth."
"Jehun."
Hannah stared at the letter, her heart pounding. The silence in her apartment now felt too loud. Her thoughts ran wild, not knowing what to believe anymore. She remembered the night he had changed. It was subtle. The way he had started locking his phone, coming home late, smiling less, holding her like he was already saying goodbye. And now this. If it was true, then everything she believed had shattered in the wrong direction. But if it was a lie, she glanced at the clock. Nearly 4 p.m. Just like yesterday. Would he really be there? The doubt gnawed at her. But something deeper, something stubborn, rose within her. Hannah grabbed her coat. And the letter. The streets of Gangnam were alive, as always. Neon signs flickered to life above the polished windows of cafes and boutiques, and crowds flowed like restless tides through crosswalks and alleys. But to Hannah, it all blurred into a background hum. She stood at the edge of the square, heart pounding in her ears, the letter folded tightly in her pocket. He had said the cafe on the corner by the bookstore. The same one they had visited together dozens of times. The place where she first told him she wanted to be a writer. Where he used to tease her about her obsession with black coffee. Her boots clicked softly on the pavement as she walked. Her eyes scanned the windows, the chairs, the familiar doorway. No Jehun. Not yet. She checked her watch. 4:02. The seconds crawled. She ordered a drink to keep her hands busy, then sat by the window where she could see the street clearly. Every time the cafe door opened, her body tensed. 4:08. 4:15. 4:27. Still no sign of him. Just as she was about to leave, she noticed a man standing across the street. He was alone, wearing a long coat, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His posture was rigid, unnatural, as though he was forcing himself to stay still. Hannah's breath caught. Even from this distance, she could tell. Jahun. She didn't move. Neither did he. Instead, he raised a hand slightly, not a wave, more of a signal. Then he turned and disappeared into the alley behind the bookstore. She hesitated only a second before grabbing her bag and following. The alley was narrow, the hum of the main road fading behind her as the walls closed in. There was no one else around. Halfway down, she saw him, leaning against the brick wall, eyes downcast, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. She stopped several feet away, close enough to see his face, older than she remembered, more tired. But still unmistakably Jahun. "I didn't think you'd come," he said without looking at her. "I almost didn't," she replied. "I read your letter." He nodded once. "Then you know." "I know something. I don't know if it's the truth." His eyes met hers then, and for the first time in over a year, she saw the Jahun she remembered. But it flickered like a light on the verge of going out. "I didn't bring you here to make excuses," he said. "I brought you here to warn you." A sharp chill ran through her. "Warn me about what?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "They know you read the letter. They've been watching me. Watching you. That's why I kept my distance." Her heart thundered. "Who's they, Jahun?" He didn't answer. A door creaked open at the end of the alley. Jahun turned toward it, tension rippling through his frame. "You need to leave. Right now." But Hannah stood firm. "Not until you tell me what you've done." Jahun took a slow breath, then said in barely more than a whisper, "It's not about what I've done. It's about what they want from me, and what I refuse to give." Before she could speak again, the door slammed shut. Jahun froze. Then, he shoved a slip of paper into her hand. "If you want answers, go to the address. But do not come looking for me again." And just like that, he disappeared into the shadows. Hannah looked down at the note. It was a Seoul district she didn't recognize. A place far from the glimmering lights of Gangnam. She gripped it tight, her breath unsteady. What had she just stepped into? The next morning, Hannah stood at the edge of Mapo district, in front of a rundown building with faded paint and rusted gates. The address Jahun had given her led here, far from the modern towers and bright cafes she was used to. A chill crept under her coat as she stared at the building. It looked abandoned, but she could see faint traces of life. A curtain slightly drawn. A flickering light inside. She pushed the gate open, its groan echoing through the quiet street, and stepped into the courtyard. Weeds pushed through cracked concrete. The scent of dust and old metal filled the air. She reached the main door and hesitated. Then, with a breath, she knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. It turned. The door creaked open into darkness. "Hello," she called softly. Silence. Then a faint click, like someone switching off a light. Her breath caught. Before she could decide whether to step in or turn back, a voice came from the shadows. "You're early." Hannah froze. A woman stepped into view, mid-30s, dressed in a gray suit, sharp-eyed and calm. She closed the door behind Hannah, as though she had always been waiting. "You're Hannah, aren't you?" the woman said. "Who are you?" Hannah asked, keeping her voice steady. "A friend of Jahun's." "Of sorts. He told me you'd come if things went wrong." "Things have gone wrong." The woman tilted her head. "That depends on who you ask." She motioned toward a narrow staircase. "Come. There's something you should see." Hannah hesitated, then followed her down. The stairs creaked under their steps, leading to a dimly lit basement. At the bottom was a small room filled with old filing cabinets, a humming desktop computer, and several thick folders stacked on a dusty table. The woman walked over, picked up a folder, and handed it to Hannah. Start with this. Inside were photographs, documents, names, dozens of them. People Hannah didn't know. Places she'd never been. But in the center of one page, she recognized a familiar face.
Jahun.
He looked younger,
Smiling.
but next to his photo was something else, a government seal. And below that, the words, Asset 17A. Terminated, pending review. Her blood ran cold. "What is this?" she whispered. The woman leaned against the table. This is what Jahun ran from. He used to work for a private agency that did jobs the government couldn't be linked to. Surveillance, influence, disruption. Hannah flipped through more pages. Code names, mission briefs,
Targets.
I don't understand. Why give this to me? Because he trusted you. And because they're trying to erase him. Everything he did. Everyone he knew. Including you. But I have nothing to do with any of this. The woman raised an eyebrow. You do now. Jahun didn't just leave that letter behind for closure. He left it as a trigger. A way to make sure someone would keep digging. And he knew you wouldn't let it go. Hannah stepped back, heart racing. This is insane. The woman nodded, almost gently. It is. But it's also true. Hannah stared at the file in her hands. The basement suddenly felt smaller, darker. So what happens now? She asked. The woman walked to a cabinet, pulled out another folder, and handed it over. Now, you decide how far you're willing to go for the truth. And in Hannah's heart, something shifted, a pull she couldn't ignore, no matter the cost. The folder Hannah received from the woman in the basement felt heavier than it looked. Back at her apartment, she laid it on her small dining table, hesitating before flipping it open. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but anticipation. Inside were 3 neatly typed documents, each marked confidential. One of them, strangely, was addressed directly to her. The heading read, To Han Suman. Subject, Contingency File, Asset 17A. From Director CO, Unit 45. It didn't make sense. Hannah had never gone by her full name since university, and no one had access to her real surname outside legal documents. She began reading. If you are reading this, it means Jahun failed to contain the breach. It means he chose to involve you. Hannah blinked. The tone was cold. Official. You should know that the information you possess could destabilize more than a single agency. There are agreements, made in silence, that cannot afford daylight. Jahun knew that. And he crossed the line. We don't expect your cooperation. But we do expect your silence. There was a break in the paragraph. Then, for your safety, leave Seoul. Do not contact the media. Do not speak of Jahun again. Forget him. And live. The paper slipped from Hannah's fingers. Her mind buzzed. It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. She picked up the second document. It was a transcript, dated 3 weeks before Jahun's disappearance. A conversation between Jahun and someone identified only as SD45. If I vanish, send it to her. Are you serious? You said she didn't know anything.
Exactly.
That's why she's the only one I can trust. Hannah stared at the final line, her breath catching. This file wasn't supposed to exist, and someone had broken protocol to make sure she received it. She opened the 3rd page. It was handwritten, faded in places but familiar. Jahun's handwriting. Hannah, I didn't want you to be part of this. I still don't. But they won't stop unless someone stands up. I ran out of time. So now it's yours. If you walk away, I'll understand. But if you stay, don't do it for me. Do it because they think you won't. And please forgive me. Hannah folded the letter slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Something inside her shifted again. Not confusion, not sorrow. Purpose. She stood and walked to her kitchen. On the shelf, behind an old recipe book, was a box Jahun once gave her, meant for emergencies. Inside was a prepaid mobile phone. She turned it on. No messages. No signal. But after a minute, a number appeared on the screen. A single line of text followed. Trust only this. She didn't recognize the number, but in her gut, she knew it was the next step. She took a breath and dialed. It rang once.
Twice.
Then a voice answered. Say your name. Hannah hesitated, then spoke clearly. Hannah. A pause.
Then,
Follow the signal. You're being watched. The line went dead. Hannah looked out her window. The city lights shimmered, calm and unknowing. But now she knew, and she wasn't going to run. Hannah followed the signal to a quiet neighborhood in Mapogu, where an old cafe stood beneath a canopy of rustling trees. The name on the faded sign above the door was Cafe Haru, unfamiliar, unassuming. Exactly the kind of place people overlooked. She entered cautiously, a soft chime ringing as she pushed the door open. The space was mostly empty, save for a man sitting in the back corner. He looked up immediately, as if he'd been waiting. He was in his 50s, gray creeping into his hair, wearing a simple black coat and scarf. His eyes, however, were alert, sharp. He gestured to the seat opposite him without speaking. Hannah sat, tension held tight in her shoulders. You're late, he said quietly, then added. But you came. That's something. Who are you? He didn't answer. Instead, he placed a small device on the table and pressed a button. A soft buzz hummed, some kind of jammer. Now we can talk, he said. Hannah narrowed her eyes. Talk about what? The file. Jahun. And the real reason he disappeared. She hesitated. You knew him. The man nodded. Better than most. We trained together. Fought side by side. But Jahun, he always had a conscience. That's dangerous in our line of work. What was he trying to expose? The man leaned back, folding his arms. It wasn't just corruption. It was a system built on silencing people like you. Like him. Asset 17A was just one part of it. A trial run. A trial run for what? To see how easily truth can be erased. Hannah stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. Why involve me? Because Jahun believed you wouldn't let it go. And because you're the last person they'd suspect. He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. This holds a partial backup of what he uncovered. Surveillance footage. Internal memos. Names. But be warned. Once you open this, you can't pretend you didn't. She reached for it, but paused. What do you want from me? I want nothing. But Jahun wanted you to choose. The man stood, dropping a receipt on the table. It had a phone number scribbled on the back. If you want to run, disappear. Burn this. If you want to finish what he started, meet me here again. Same time. Tomorrow. He turned to leave. Wait, Hannah said. Your name? He looked back, eyes steady. I don't have one anymore. Then he walked out, leaving her alone with the flash drive and 100 questions. Hannah looked around. The cafe was still quiet, sunlight filtering through the dusty windows. She slipped the drive into her coat pocket. Her hand trembled, not from fear, from decision. She stood, walking out into the fading light, the receipt clutched tightly in her hand. She didn't know yet which path she would choose. But one thing was certain. They had underestimated her. The air felt colder the next morning. Hannah wrapped her coat tighter as she stood outside Cafe Haru, hands deep in her pockets. The city moved as usual around her. Buses hissed, pedestrians rushed by, life oblivious to the storm quietly building in her chest. She hadn't slept. The flash drive had sat on her desk all night, untouched. She had stared at it, wondering if opening it would destroy what was left of her peace. Now, it was in her coat pocket again, pressing against her ribs like a secret heartbeat. The man was already inside when she entered. No words, just a nod. She took the seat across from him, and he handed her an old laptop. Offline. Battery-powered. No trace. Open it, he said.
She did.
The system booted to a black screen with one prompt. Enter password. Hannah looked up. I don't know it.
You do, he said.
You just haven't remembered it yet. Frustrated, she stared at the blinking cursor. Her mind raced. She thought about Jahun, his voice, his messages, their shared jokes, the little things he said when he was tired. She typed a name. Mincio.
Wrong.
She tried a date. The night of the safe house fire. 0921. Still wrong. The man was silent, letting her struggle. Then something clicked in her memory, a late-night call. Jehun laughing, exhausted, telling her the one thing he trusted more than himself. She typed.
Dalbit.
The screen shifted.
File trees appeared.
Encrypted folders. Videos. Documents. Dozens of names. Her hand hovered over the trackpad. These are real people, she whispered. The man nodded. Victims. Whistleblowers. Test subjects. Many of them were erased. Some still alive, hiding. She scrolled, her eyes wide. There were photos. Surveillance stills. One of her, taken from across the street, time-stamped months ago. She froze. They've been watching me. Yes, the man said. Since before Jehun disappeared. She opened a video file. Jehun appeared on the screen, tired but determined, his voice steady. If you're watching this, I'm probably gone. And if you've made it this far, it means they haven't stopped you yet. He leaned closer to the camera. Hannah, I never wanted you involved. But I also knew I couldn't stop you. You're stronger than you think. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. He continued. This isn't about me anymore. It's about truth. And what it costs. The screen faded to black. Hannah closed the laptop. I want to release this, she said, her voice low. Everything. The man exhaled. Then you need help. And not the kind you find on the surface. He handed her a small notebook. Inside were names, burner numbers, contact codes. These people owed Jehun, or hated the same system he did. But they don't come cheap. You'll need leverage. Hannah nodded, fingers tightening around the notebook. And when I do, she asked, then you burn the house down. He stood to leave, but this time she stopped him. What do I call you? He paused, then smiled faintly. Call me a debt. One that still needs to be paid. And then he vanished, out into the Seoul morning. Hannah sat in the quiet cafe, the laptop still warm in front of her, her reflection ghosting in the screen. She had a choice. And now she had the proof. The sky over Seoul turned an unnatural shade of gray. A quiet drizzle began to fall, coating the city in a slick, silver sheen. Hannah moved swiftly, her hood up, the flash drive tucked securely inside a hidden pouch in her bag. Every step felt heavier than the last. The city had changed for her. What once felt like home now pulsed with quiet danger. She no longer walked with certainty. Every alley, every glint of a mirror, every silhouette behind tinted glass made her spine stiffen. She wasn't being paranoid. They were watching. She had seen the proof. A photo of her entering her apartment 3 weeks ago. A still frame of her talking to Mincio at a market stall. Time-stamped, dated, cataloged. And now, she knew what she carried wasn't just evidence. It was a target. She ducked into a basement stairwell beneath an old laundromat in Itaewon. Her fingers found the lock under the stairs, the pattern Jehun had once shown her, disguised as graffiti. A faint click, and the wall slid slightly open. Inside was a narrow tunnel, lit by nothing but flickering emergency bulbs. She entered, heart pounding. The tunnel led to a dimly lit bunker, barely larger than a studio apartment. Inside, 3 people sat at battered desks cluttered with wires and screens. You're late, a woman said, her short-cropped hair dyed an aggressive shade of purple. We thought you'd been grabbed. I nearly was, Hannah replied. Did you bring it? She held up the drive. The room stilled. Even the buzzing of the monitors seemed to fade. The woman, who called herself Kira, reached for it. Hannah didn't let go. Before I give this to you, I want to know something. Kira raised an eyebrow. Go on. If we release this, who dies first? Kira didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned Hannah, measuring something. Probably you, she said flatly. And then all of us. Hannah nodded.
Good.
Then it's worth it. They got to work. Screens lit up with strings of code. The bunker became a nest of activity. The files were duplicated, then scattered through anonymous nodes across the net. We'll make it impossible to erase, said a man with thick glasses. The moment someone tries, a dozen backup sites will go live. But we need a spark, Kira added. Something big enough to make people look. That night, the first video was posted. Jehun's message. No edits. No filters. Just his face. His voice. It spread fast. Faster than anyone expected. But so did the response. Within 2 hours, several major accounts sharing the footage were taken down. The original video vanished from 4 platforms. One mirror site was hacked. A blogger who commented on it was arrested under false charges. They're scared, Kira muttered. They're fighting it already. Then the message came. An email. No sender. No subject. Just a line of text. Leave Seoul. Tonight. Hannah stared at the screen. They know I'm here. They always did, said Kira. But now they know what you've done. A boom echoed in the distance. The power flickered. Then darkness. Kira pulled a torch. Get your things. We're burned. Sirens wailed above ground. And in the shadows, the hunt began. The darkness felt alive, pulsing, closing in. The sound of sirens grew louder, echoing through the underground bunker. Hannah's breath quickened as her fingers fumbled for her phone. It was dead. Get ready, Kira said sharply, her voice cutting through the tension. They're already here. Hannah's eyes darted around the small room. She could hear the faint hum of machines and the rush of her own heartbeat. She needed to think. She needed to make a decision. Kira pulled a map from her bag, spreading it across the table. The exit route is through an old service tunnel, but it's guarded. We'll have to move fast. Then let's go, Hannah said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around her. They moved quickly, slipping through the narrow corridors of the bunker, avoiding the spotlights from the drones overhead. Hannah could hear footsteps in the distance, other people, searching, hunting. They were closing in on them, and she could feel the pressure building. She glanced at Kira, who gave a silent nod. The group reached a reinforced steel door at the end of the corridor. Kira pressed a button, and the door slowly slid open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit tunnel. Once we're out, there's no turning back, Kira warned, her face grim. They'll hunt us until we're dead. Hannah nodded, but she wasn't scared anymore. Her fear had been replaced by something else, resolve. She didn't have a choice now. There was no going back. Not after everything she had learned. Not after everything she had done. They sprinted through the tunnel, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick concrete walls. The air was cold, the only light coming from Kira's flashlight, casting long, haunting shadows ahead of them. After what felt like hours, they finally emerged into the alley behind a rundown apartment building. Hannah breathed a sigh of relief. But it was short-lived. A black car screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. The door opened, and 2 men stepped out, their faces hidden behind masks. Kira immediately pulled Hannah behind a pile of crates. Stay down, she hissed, reaching for her weapon. Hannah's heart pounded in her chest as she crouched low, her mind racing. The men were talking to each other in low voices. Hannah couldn't make out the words, but she could feel their presence, the danger in the air. Do you know who they are? Hannah whispered, her voice barely audible. Not for sure, Kira replied, her eyes scanning the alley. But they've been hunting us for a while. We need to move. But before they could make a move, one of the men turned and stared directly at them. His eyes locked with Hannah's. He knew, and with a cold, calculating smile, he started walking towards them.